Hey everybody, welcome and thanks so much for joining us today. Really looking forward to chatting with you all about this important topic, this accountant shortage that we're seeing in the market and how we can use technology to make life easier or more manageable for controllers. If you do have any questions that come up, feel free to put them in the chat box and we'll make sure to answer those after this session. So just as a quick reminder about Brex, we do offer corporate cards, expense management, and a suite of other products. And then the three primary focus areas for us as a company is really working to make sure that compliance and accounting is easy for the users of the product without sacrificing on quality, making sure that everyone stays on budget and within policy, and then also just being a truly global solution so that folks don't have to juggle all their different entities or geos in different platforms. So with that being said, as far as the agenda today, Eric and myself will run through a brief introduction, talk about the problem that we're facing today in the market with the accountant shortage, offering up three different ways that we can kind of see for people to take action to address this issue. And then also just, hey, how does Brex help folks like you and me out as well as our companies? Eric, you want to kick things off with an intro?
Yeah, sure. And I want to say thank you all for attending this webinar and Kevin for being such a gracious host. My name is Eric Zoe. I'm the Chief Accounting Officer at Brex. I also serve as the president of our broker-dealer. Prior to joining Brex 4 years ago, I spent over a decade at PricewaterhouseCoopers in their banking and capital markets audit practice. I mostly focused on a lot of multinational financial institutions. I'm excited to be here with you today.
Awesome, thanks. And my name is Kevin Moore. I'm our controller here at Brex. Been at the company for about 5 years. Prior to Brex, I was also at Pricewaterhouse for a handful of years. And Eric and myself have both been around at Brex for kind of the whole duration at this point. And so, taking it from everybody sitting around the same conference room to, operating in 4 different countries, 1,000+ employees, working to make sure we get clean audits and making sure that, our books and records are closed timely and accurately. Okay, so on to the topic at hand, this accountant shortage that we're facing. Eric, do you want to talk through this one?
Sure. I think it comes as no surprise to the folks listening in on this call, but it's been tough out there trying to hire accountants and expand our team. And I think that's being caused by a lack of interest at the college level and in the major. I think there's a lot of skills that prospective accountants have that are also good for other fields, including software engineering, which I know has been very popular over the last few years. But what does that mean for us? That means from the peak that we saw in 2019, there's been a huge drop, almost, let's call it 40 million accountants have left the work field. And we have to figure out how to compensate for that as leaders of our departments and the profession. And so, I'll put it back to you, Kevin. When we face turnover now, think about that. How long does it take to ramp someone up?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it depends a little bit on the level that you're bringing this person into and the type of task you're trying to assign them or get them to provide coverage over. But, I think we typically see once we kick off a search, best case scenario, it's going to be 2 months before we could get them in the door. And then, maybe they're adding value within that couple weeks after that, but truly, are they hitting the ground running? Probably takes at least another 3 to 6 months at that point. And so, not everybody out there lives, breathes, and dies accounting like you and me, but this is one of those hard things where it's just how do we deal with these capacity constraints we see so that we can keep getting the job done on time. So in terms of, 3 levers, right, that I think whenever there's a loss of a staff on the team through some turnover or, a new product that we're launching, a new entity we're expanding into, or also just, more volume of work, that you're seeing if your business is hopefully growing during this time. First lever being people, whether that's FTEs, whether that's contractors, or leveraging third-party consultants to help you out. Taking a look at the processes that you have themselves, and if there is wiggle room to adjust those, and then the systems that are within that tech stack that you have, and how do those work for you or potentially against you as you're trying to get your jobs done. So yeah, so, first time I hear about something coming up where it's like, hey, we want to launch this new product, or hey, we're opening up a new entity. Probably my gut reaction is going to be like, ooh, I'm going to raise my hand and use this as an opportunity to, increase my headcount for my team. Fingers crossed, right? Like that gets approved, but definitely in today's macro, where people are a little tighter on budgets here, and also just, hey, are there even people out there that are willing to take this job? Kind of a tough one. And so how successful?
Why is it that anytime we face a problem, we're always like, can we get a head count? Why is the head count the first thing we think about?
Maybe because it's a little easier, and maybe it's because I'm a little selfish at times, and it doesn't necessarily require as much critical thinking about whatever it is that you're coming through, versus just like, oh, I want to be protective of my team and say everyone is already at full capacity, and I just want a new person that I can plug into this and let this be their scope of work.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Ultimately, right, having a person, that's probably the most dynamic, because processes also, and the way our business is run today, certainly at Brex, it's so dynamic. So having a person and being able to mold that person into what you need to be, period to period, it might be also different. That actually is easier overall.
Yeah, but again, hey, let's say that we don't have that FTE in here. Thinking about, okay, how can we reshuffle the work across the team and potentially say like, oh, what are some of those more mundane or repetitive tasks that it is really, you follow this SOP, and as long as you follow this SOP, you're going to get the right result out there. And so one thing we've been successful at over this past year, right, is launching the outsourcing of certain tasks or responsibilities, right? Things in the AP or procure to pay space, looking at bank reconciliations, looking at some other tasks like that, email inbox management for folks. But again, right, like you have to have the budget for it, and it does take time to stand that stuff up.
It took more time. They're overseas. It took more time to ramp them up than an onshore, but they are a more flexible workforce. So I think we've gotten a big benefit from doing that for sure.
Yeah, and in terms of that, hey, say you did get that head count, but do say that it does take a little bit longer for them to come in, or really hit the ground running and contributing value. Depending on that task, depending on the level that they're going to be brought in at, everyone has some different strategies as far as, hey, what really is the right way for me to get them in contributing value to address either people being over capacity or certain work just not getting done. And then do you want to talk just a little bit about like the ownership?
I do. Just what ends up happening is, right, the accountant shortage, where it's hard to find accountants. It's hard to get the headcount approved, and then it's hard to get accountants, right? And what ends up happening is that work that has to be done day over day, the BAU, we call it business as usual, right? That work still has to be done. And so if our team still only has 4 people, 5 people, I remember those early days, we end up decentralizing the function, right? So there are tasks that we have to do with managing compliance for our T&E spend, making sure all the invoices are attached to a certain purchase order. Like we end up asking the whole company to help with that. The manager has to review every expense. The manager has to make sure that the purchase order that was submitted is complete and accurate, because I don't have a centralized person on this team to help with that. And it puts a burden on the organization. I think that's an organizational decision. Company to company, they have to decide if it's okay to decentralize something like that. But for me, I would much rather prefer our salespeople to focus on sales, right, and generate revenue for the company, rather than be burdened by something like this. That's just my opinion.
Well, I also think, right, like maybe leadership might be supportive of that decentralized function, and then once they start getting the feedback from those folks outside of that accounting org, and they're like, wait a second, why is this manager, why is this engineer doing this other stuff? Oh yeah, never mind. Support it. We want to shift back to centralized. So then shifting and talking about, hey, let's look at those processes that we have in place today. One of the things we always, or I know you love to ask, and now I parrot it, is, hey, is the juice worth the squeeze on whatever this task is or whatever this process is, right? Like, how much work do we really have to put in to get this number at the end of the day? Or how much work does it really take for us to get an actual invoice approved or to complete a certain task? And so, I think as we work through our primary deliverable, that month end close report where we're giving a budget versus actual or month over month and asking ourselves, hey, is it okay if this number is materially accurate, right? And then thinking through, what really are the risks over certain, business processes or GLs that we see out there. Anything you'd like to chime in there?
Yeah, I mean, I was an auditor for a long time, mostly public companies, all SOX compliant, and they had a lot of processes and controls in place for almost every number that was on the financial statements, or like that fed into the financial statements, I should say. And I think the one thing that I learned coming to Brex and being in industry now for the last 4 years is I really have a much better understanding of who the stakeholders of the financial information are, right? Management, figuring out like, hey, what's going on with our business? Where are we succeeding? Where are we failing? Where should we invest more? And needing the data to just come to the right decision strategically for the company. And I think for most decisions like that, a difference of $200, $500, even $1,000 or so, like it's not going to change whether or not I invest more in go to market or invest more in engineering, or maybe even give us a headcount. Frankly, I think I have a much better idea of like, hey, this is the dollar threshold in which, like, if it meets here, then okay, we may be doing things a little bit. We should do things a little bit differently, and that's really important. It's really important to understand that, like, hey, if you're doing this work, the work's going to get the data more accurate, and then is that data going to actually help someone make a different decision or affirm their current decision, right? Mm-hmm. And that's for management. I said that's probably one of the most important, but also investors as well. And I just have a much better sense of that now, and we do that here, right, at Brex. We make sure that the work that we're doing is going to have a good output and make and change how we perceive things, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think, right, you kind of have to battle against our natures as accountants or auditors, where you're saying like, oh, it has to reconcile to the penny, and if it doesn't reconcile to the penny, I'm going to spend hours and hours and hours for that. But then you're working 150% of your capacity and you're burning yourself out, and then it takes, people like you and me or leadership or asking those stakeholders, do you really care that much, or is it okay? And then hopefully you do get that, it's okay, right? Like, let's focus on getting this, done timely with the existing resources in place. And then, right, like, it does feel like a little bit of a sigh of relief that you don't have to chase down, hopefully, every single thing or be 100% accurate every single month.
And yet there is that level of work that you still have to do at the end of the month, right? Those first 2 weeks of the month when we're closing the books. And, I think one thing we've done is try to implement what we call a continuous close. Do you have like a couple of things to say about that? Like, what have we done to try to implement that and quote unquote flatten the spike, right?
Yeah. And so, as we've carved up, right, our GL, or looked at all the different business processes out there, I'm looking at certain things and saying like, hey, does it really make sense for us to do 100% of our work right at the month end? Or is there stuff that we could do day to day? Is there stuff that we could pull forward a week or so, just so that it isn't this mad scramble at the end of the month where I'm now doing 100% of my accounting? And so that's, thinking through, hey, how frequently are you reconciling your bank accounts, right? Does it make sense to just do that on a daily basis, so that you are really, really tight on that task? And then, that bank reconciliation isn't something that's lingering far into, that month-end close process. Looking at accruals, I know that that's a big one that we've experienced a lot of success in. Being able to shorten the time for us to close the books and still be accurate with, our expenses, is saying, hey, let's actually put a cutoff, BD -7 or something like that for accruals. And then asking, stakeholders to estimate, right, what they think that ending piece will be. And what that really allows us to do is focus on those big ticket items that management does really care about being 100% accurate, and then also allowing us to work well with the finance function so that we can layer that narrative, layer that analysis on top of the numbers themselves, so that management can make those the best decisions possible. And I think, right, in general, when you think about overall retention, and keeping your staff engaged, right? Like, nobody likes to work 20-hour days every single month in perpetuity. And so, hey, if you are able to flatten that spike where that month end isn't such a bear, then hey, are you suddenly retaining that talent for a good bit longer? Systems. Now this is a fun one for me. Thinking through, hey, what Brex was, right, when we first joined, looking at what systems we had in place, what systems we didn't have in place, and then how that's evolved to continue to support Brex as it is today. It's pretty wild. This is one of those things that I didn't know a whole lot about, of all of the work that went into making that system, whether it's your accounting ERP, whether it's your procure to pay system, whether it's your HRIS, whether it's your reconciliation tool, your close management tool, or the absence of any of those tools. This is definitely something that I know you and I have, some things have gone very well in this space, and other things have definitely been nice learning opportunities for us.
Yeah, I'll add one thing about systems that's really important to me. The system can only enhance the process, right? You have to have a good process first before you implement a system, and you have to be comfortable that that process will stand at least the next 2 years or 3 years or whatever, in order for implementation of the system to be worth it. Because what happens is, if you have a process and it's not great and you want to change it later, well, if you implement that system first, changing the process becomes tougher, right? Because if it's just a process with a bunch of people, like, again, it's more malleable, it's more dynamic when you're working with people. But once you implement that piece of technology, although it speeds up your current process, now it's tougher to change it because it's embedded with that technology. And that's just it was a really eye-opening experience for us, I think, over the last 4 years as we've been growing the accounting function here.
Yeah, and I guess maybe how do you think a little bit about that, the investment, right, the professional services or that time that we have to spend to implement the new system, the cost of that new system, right? Like, some of those SaaS tools out there are definitely have some sticker shock, versus throwing a body at the problem and solving through more manual work just by adding more people in.
Yeah, so like one thing I definitely always look for is return on investment, so ROI. And I think about, for a particular AP process that we investigated a few years ago, right, and we implemented a solution there, we were like, okay, our company is hundreds and hundreds of people now, and all these POs that are coming in from all these different departments, it's going to take a lot more work to field them, to get them approved by finance, to just like facilitate the whole thing, right? And I said, okay, if it's going to take like 3 headcount to do this, let's look into what a system can do to like enhance our current process. And that's what we did. And I think ultimately, right, we saved 3 headcount for that process by implementing the system. And for the company at large, that's a much better ROI. And plus, the system scales. When we grew larger, right, we didn't need to. We would have gone from 3 headcount to 4 headcount to whatever. Like, we
And
could
solving
just
through,
maintain
and
the
also,
system.
right, solving through manual work, lots of more copy paste, emails in, judgment calls that people are making, and so introducing more risk as well.
I know you missed the AP at inbox.
But yeah, there's also that piece of, well, I've purchased this solution. I really need to make it a priority to make that system work for me, right? Like, not a lot of SaaS solutions out there just get dropped in and immediately add value. And so this is something, that I really had to learn was, oh, wait a second, I do need to make this a priority so that this is adding value, versus, making our lives worse.
Yeah, and I would say, when you're implementing the system, that's also a really good time to think about your process And there are a lot of people out there, they want to implement the system, and it's lift and shift, right? Lifting and shifting your current process into the new system. That's also a really valuable time to reassess what's possible with your process. Now that you have this system, can you improve the process because of the system and make things efficient all around, right? And we definitely tried to do that. I think for us in the recent implementations we've done, like use that time, use that first 1 to 2 months of prep before the implementation to think about your process and whether or not there's opportunity for improvement there with the new tech.
Yeah, and also, right, like, hey, when is really the right time for me to launch something? Do I really want to launch this thing on 1/1, or does it make sense to launch it in an off period? Do I want to do a flip the switch type of exercise where you're going truly from 0 to 100%, or can you roll this thing out gradually where you are, testing with potentially smaller groups, just so that you can get that rapid feedback loop? In a lot of ways, this kind of ties into what we do here at Brex when we wear our product hats. So Eric, do you want to talk just a little bit about how Brex can help out?
Yeah, I think one of the things that would be remiss if we didn't mention was that, right, we're the accountants at Brex, we're the accounting function at Brex. We also use our own systems within this function, right, to serve the company from accounting. And so, you mentioned earlier how Brex Empower is an all-in-one system. We do use it for managing a lot of our T&E spend and for closing the books on time. What I love about Brex Empower is that, we have 1,200 employees. Every single employee has a card. There's a variety of use cases for the card for all these employees, right? Whether it's the work from home stipend, whether it's their new hire stipend for tech, like building up their office in their house or apartment. And there's also a lot of traveling and other stuff that's happening again, right? So people are using the card for a variety of business expenses. And for 1,200 people, that would be a long reconciliation process at the end of the month, right? And I think where Empower really succeeded, and we helped here. It's nice being at the company, helping the product folks design something for yourself. What was really cool is that, they built an automated journal entry flow from the system. So every time there's an expense on the card, it'll get booked to the right GL code. Oh, by the way, it'll also get booked to the right attributes that we now care so much about, the right department, the right cost center, the right location. And, we've been really focused on managing burn. Getting these expenses mapped to the right place has helped us understand like who's accountable for what and target the right areas for efficiencies. Right. So these are all
like,
things.
Yeah, I mean, to cut you off, right? Like this product, it's easily usable, right, by our accounting team to, handle the accounting for the pure accounting aspects of these 1,000+ transactions that are flowing through each month. Taking, what otherwise might be this incredibly robust 20-something step SOP and shrinking that down to just a couple of steps. And also, right, like not only does it save us from having to throw bodies at this problem, it also saves us, right, from being overly burdensome on our employees so that they can go and focus on the stuff that actually does matter. Focusing on, selling the product, focusing on building new features, and really working on, their actual day jobs versus, like, let me type in a memo here, let me code this thing to this budget over here. Let me, do I need to upload, what information do I need to upload for this thing or that thing? And so it is one of those nice things where we do hear great feedback from the users across the company, as well as being able to manage it ourselves.
Just one more thing I want to add in, like, and you brought up the compliance aspect. I spoke about all the accounting. This tool also, right, by getting all the budgets pre-approved for all the spend, what ends up happening is our employees are using the cards, they're making transactions on the card, and we have automated receipts. We have automated memos that are being generated. And then all that stuff basically makes it so that when they spend, they don't have to do anything else. It feeds into the system. I have all the records I need for IRS substantiation. And it really does make their lives easier. Now they're just using the card for the business. There's no other compliance work that they have to do, and I can do my accounting still very easily. So I think we've really seen a lot of benefits from the product that way.
Yeah, and maybe the last thing I'll say, right, is when you think about like other systems in that like office of the CFO tech stack, sometimes you could say like I'm on this one tool and this tool will only take me from 0 to 50, or this will only work if I have one domestic entity. And then as soon as you hit a certain threshold or you open up a new business line or something like that, you have to throw it out the door. You have to solve through offline work or something like that. And I think one of the things I'm most proud of is with this Brex product here is, this is something that truly scales, right? And you can make it as complex, right, in terms of that rule structure, right, where you're saying, hey, my folks in this department, right, this is their rule structure. Hey, my folks over here, or folks at a certain management level, they get a different set of rules in place. And so you can make it as simple as you want it to be, or potentially as complex to support whatever your business needs are. Yeah. So, with that being said, just want to say thank you all for the time. Really, really appreciate it. Really, thrilled to be a part of this community. Eric and myself, we're always trying to learn more. We know that we don't have all of the answers by any means. And, if there are any questions that people have, please shout them out. And I'm sure we would love to learn from you all as well.
Thank you all.
Thank you.